Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sibbick, before lunch we were on the 14th of December. I'm now moving to the 21st of December, and it seems as though it was a very busy pre-Christmas period in 1998.
It was.
Let's look at CBO 001 401 underscore 057, please. This is a document from the Chief Secretary to the Treasury suggesting a proposed way forward. Do you remember this at all?
In general terms, yes.
And that Chief Secretary to the Treasury as of that date was Stephen Byers. Can we go over to page 2, please, which is where we find the passage on the way forward. It's in the second half of that page. So his proposal for the way forward was stage 1, stabilization. Ministers would agree by the 24th of December to continue the programme with a benefit payment card, with a firm recommitment to deliver the project on time by all parties. To agree commercial terms with ICL on the basis of the 9th of December offer updated by Keith Todd's letter of the 18th of December, and various other provisions, but the key one there being to continue with the benefit payment card, and then there being a stage 2, which we'll see over the page. And it's the bottom of the page is stage 2. By the end of March 1999, with the commercial arrangements redrawn as above, the parties will have an opportunity to see whether the programme can do more to deliver the government's present policy objectives. Ministers will ask the Post Office to take forward discussions between parties in the context of the PPP envisaged with ICL to explore what more could be done with the agreement of all parties to further the following objectives. And there are various objectives on the page after. Essentially, what is being proposed by the Chief Secretary to the Treasury at that stage is more horizon rather than less horizon. Do you agree with that? As in to use horizon for future additional purposes?
Yes, I think it was envisaged from quite an early stage that horizon, as it was being developed at that point in time, needed to be a springboard, if you like, or a platform that could be developed for wider and more modern purposes.
And then perhaps we could go to Bayes 0000397, and that is a ministerial submission that I believe you drafted on the 21st of December. So again, the same day as that was received from the Chief Secretary to the Treasury. Would you have received the Chief Secretary's document in advance? Would you have seen it before others, perhaps?
I think it looks from this as though when I drafted this, we had sight of the Chief Secretary's note.
Yes. So it says here, there, the Chief Secretary's office has this evening circulated a note. Would this ministerial submission perhaps have been drafted earlier in the day and bits filled in, or do you think you actually urgently responded in the evening of the 21st of December?
I think it's entirely possible that I responded that evening. I do remember that around this time there were an awful lot of awfully late nights.
And if we look at paragraph 2, please. It says there in bold and underlined, this is the outcome for which we fought for the last 9 months, and you should strongly support the Chief Secretary's proposal. So clearly, in terms of the DTI position, as at 21st of December, it was fully in support of that proposal.
Yes.
And can we go over the page, please, to paragraph 7? Now, we saw stage 2 mentioned in the Chief Secretary's document, and it says here, stage 2 has clearly been devised to try to make the package more palatable to DSS. At any level, much beyond that of a rather obvious face saver, it seems unlikely to succeed. What may also help, however, is that the argument has moved quite strongly against DSS and option 3, termination of Horizon, rapid move to ACT, on two fronts in recent weeks. Can you tell us about where things had reached at that stage then, and which government departments were supportive of the DTI at that stage?
I think we knew at that stage that number 10 was broadly supportive of moving in that direction, albeit with some reluctance, in that they saw it, we all saw it, as a less than optimum solution.
And perhaps we can look at a letter to number 10, and that is CBO 001 401_053, please. This is just a couple of days later, a letter from Ian McCartney, who was then Minister of State, to the Prime Minister. Is this a document, a letter that you would have drafted or been involved in the drafting of?
Yes.
I'm going to read the first two paragraphs. It says, I've become seriously concerned at our handling of the decision on the future of BA/POCL Counters Automation Project Horizon. The Christmas break is upon us, yet despite a series of meetings and several rounds of correspondence, a decision remains beyond our grasp. On Monday, Stephen Byers put forward a suggested compromise, that's I think the one we just saw, that seemed to command a broad measure of support. Certainly we in DTI would have been content to sign up to it. Yesterday, Alistair Darling submitted a counter-proposal, which essentially revisits an option we had already discarded, namely that of continuing with the Horizon infrastructure whilst dropping the benefit payment card and introducing early compulsory ACT. The next paragraph says, we should be clear that the smart card at the heart of Alistair's proposal has absolutely no direct role in the delivery of welfare benefits or in the early introduction of front-end banking at post office counters. Would it be fair to say that that was quite a tense period with the Treasury? And those are quite strong words.
I do remember drafting this and feeling at the time, and I was absolutely not alone in this, that this kind of paralysis that seemed to have been reached at ministerial level was damaging everybody. And costing a lot of money and not moving anything towards an outcome at all, and that somehow this logjam needed to be broken, and that it was very disappointing that DSS was simply trying to loop the thing back into the same old arguments. I think the sentence about we should be clear that the smart card has absolutely no direct role in the delivery of welfare benefits. I think that meant at that point in time, not that it wasn't the right way forward for the longer term, but the system wasn't at that stage ready for that, and we hadn't at all worked out how that was all going to be done. The intention had been from the DTI's standpoint was that it would be best to continue with the benefit payment card until such time as the technology had sort of caught up, and the benefit payment card could then be converted to have smart, I mean, not the card itself, because that was just a dumb card, but that it could be replaced by a smart card which would do the same thing as the benefit payment card, plus a load of other things.
The 23rd of December 1998 is a significant date in that it was the date that Stephen Byers was appointed as Secretary of State at the DTI. It's referring to the proposal he made whilst Chief Secretary to the Treasury. Are we to read anything into his appointment at the DTI in respect of Horizon, and whether it was effectively a safe pair of hands in terms of the continuation of the Horizon project?
I think you'd probably have to ask the Prime Minister that, what his motivation in moving his ministers around in the way that he did at that point in time.
But was there a consistency of approach by his appointment?
Well, as it happens, yes, there was. Whether that was deliberate or not, I can't tell you.
If we go over the page, I assume that this letter was written before the change in Secretary of State, because it refers to.
Yes, I believe it was. Yes.
And perhaps is that a reason why it was sent from Ian McCartney at that time, because perhaps the Secretary of State himself was moving.
It might have been. I honestly don't remember.
I'm going to read the first paragraph there. So it says, "We simply cannot allow ourselves the luxury of continuing to avoid a decision by tabling each time some new variation on which to commission further work. The continuing delay and uncertainty is already causing serious damage and hardship. The 18,000 sub-postmasters who have collectively sunk £1 billion of their own money in the business are finding it increasingly difficult to sell their businesses when they wish to retire or move on. The number of such offices remaining unsold on the market is unusually high. Reinforcing this, the number of net closures within the network, offices which have closed and for which the Post Office has been unable to find replacement sub-postmasters in the 7 months since the beginning of April, is running at some 50% above the level of previous years. Most of them are those which, for social reasons, we least want to lose. The General Secretary of the National Federation of Sub-Postmasters is in no doubt that the largest single factor behind these depressing figures is the continued uncertainty about the future of the Horizon project and the associated introduction of the BPC." Again, that's quite a bleak picture if Horizon isn't taken forward. Would you agree with that?
I would a slight gloss on that. It's a pretty depressing picture if nothing is decided. We know what we wanted decided, but it was getting to the point where almost any decision that moved the thing forward would have avoided this situation, which is spelt out here. I think the level of frustration behind this that you can perhaps read into it, what I may have written the words, but it was a widely shared sentiment at that point in time.
But the next paragraph refers to concerns about Fujitsu and Japan, and
Yes.
that's something that I'm going to come on to. But certainly the picture that's being painted there for the Prime Minister is that things are going to be very bad if the Horizon project isn't taken forward.
If again, I would say if no decision is made. The decision we wanted, of course, was that Horizon should be taken forward for all the reasons that we've been spelling out for weeks and months. But I think more than anything at this point in time was, for heaven's sake, can we not take a decision on moving forward?
And then the paragraph after, I'm just going to read the first half of that paragraph, if we could scroll down slightly. The proposal in Stephen Byers' letter of the 21st of December is based on a long period of intensive commercial negotiations as well as a thorough technical appraisal. It offers both a way forward with the lowest technical and commercial risk and the best prospect of maintaining a financially viable nationwide network of post offices into the future. We again there see that reference to lowest technical risk. There seems to be a theme in DTI correspondence over this period, which is at odds with some of the risks that were being presented in that expert report that we saw this morning. Would you agree with that, or do you still maintain the position you had before lunch?
I still maintain the position. Maybe the words were not as well chosen as they might have been. We believe at that stage genuinely that the Horizon project, as outlined at this point in time, was going to work and offered a better and more secure way forward than abandoning it and starting something completely new at this point in time.
Moving to early 1999, it seems as though there are quite a few developments over Christmas and the early New Year. Can we look at CBO 001 00001 underscore 039? Thank you very much. This is a letter from the Private Secretary to the Prime Minister. It's addressed to Rod Clark, who I believe was at the DSS at that time, and it's dated the 14th of January 1999. Do you recognise this letter, or would you have seen this letter at the time?
Yeah, I would have seen it. Yes.
There's a very bold header there that says no further copies should be made of this letter, and it should be made available only to other ministers and officials with a strict need to know of its contents. Is that unusual?
I have not seen it very often, if at all.
Do you know why it would have been written?
I imagine because some very sensitive negotiations were going on at the time, and what was going on at a political level in the background was perhaps best kept away from those commercial negotiations, I guess.
And the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister's position is set out there, and I'll just read those 2 points. It says, our key objective should be to develop the Horizon project by negotiating with ICL at the earliest possible move to smart cards. It will be extremely important to get the Post Office to take this negotiation seriously, but at the end of the day, if this negotiation does not succeed in improving upon the existing benefit card project, it would be better to accept this project than to pull out of negotiation with ICL completely, with all the damage that could do. Were you aware at the time of why the Prime Minister was of that opinion?
I think the Prime Minister was very well aware of the damage that pulling out of Horizon, pulling out of ICL, I think, would do to ICL, to Fujitsu, to that sector of the UK economy, to the credibility of the PFI project, as well as the political fallout from sub-postmasters and people who like to use sub-post offices. If something was leaked or made publicly available, which meant that they risked losing their village post office or their corner shop or whatever it is. I'm quite sure from talking to people that the demonstration, the march that the National Federation of Sub-Postmasters organised back in about 1994, people were joining that not because they were so opposed to the idea of having their benefits paid into bank accounts, though a lot of them obviously were, but more because they were told that this would pose a very real threat to their village shop, to their corner shop, and so on.
We see some more involvement from the Prime Minister on the 1st of March 1999. Can we look at that? Bays 0000375. This again is a letter from the Principal Private Secretary. Would you have seen this at the time?
Well, at the time or very shortly thereafter, yes.
And can we just scroll down slightly? This addresses what was then called Option 2A. I think that was a benefit account that was only accessible at the post office, plus a smart card option. Do you remember that at all?
I confess that at this distance in time, my recollection of exactly what the various options, I think at one point there was an option A, B1, B2, B3, C. I don't remember the detail of them all.
Are you aware of what the Prime Minister's position was around this time? Did he continue to be supportive of the overall project?
I think he remained supportive of not walking away from ICL. In particular, and of finding some way that satisfied the parties who were involved in all of this, and allowed the project to move forward with ICL. I think is the key bit of that.
How important was the Prime Minister's guidance, direction, decision, view?
I would have taken it very seriously, certainly, yes.
How important, were you aware of, for example, the post office taking it seriously? Or were you aware of the post office even being aware of it?
Well, not aware of this in terms, no. You would have to ask them, obviously, but my recollection is that the post office were getting more and more fed up with this. They clearly, their position was different from ours, if you like, in that what they wanted was to keep the benefit payment card, and anything that took away from that increased, in their view, the risk to their customer base, and that was obviously something they didn't want to see, and not just their customer base, but also the revenue that they got from the benefits agency for delivering those services.
And to what extent were they influenced by senior politicians?
The Post Office Board was clearly made aware of our Secretary of State's thinking. They were also have been aware through POCL's links with the Benefits Agency and through DSS and so on, where other ministers were on all of this, and what the remaining risks were that it would all go against them still. But I think they shared the frustration that things had got stuck and they couldn't move them forward, and you know, all the time things were kind of drifting away from them. I think even at the point that the project, as finally agreed, started to be rolled out, they may have got a bit more relaxed about it once it was going, but I remember sensing still quite a lot of residual bitterness, a feeling that they had been shafted, if you like, and hadn't got what they wanted. Nobody had got exactly what they wanted. It was a compromise.
Moving to April of 1999, can we look at Bayes 0000362, please? This is another ministerial submission that you wrote on the 16th of April 1999. Can we look at paragraph 2, please? I'll just read a little bit from there. It says, after an immense amount of effort by all the parties concerned over the past 2 or 3 days to refine and analyse the costings associated with option B, the smart card-based post office benefit account. So I think that was the option that at some stage I think was a 2A, the one that I mentioned before. The inescapable conclusion is, looked at narrowly, this option is significantly more expensive than option A, the benefit payment card. Just at the end of that paragraph, the conclusion is scarcely surprising, since option B involves paying ICL for the aborted benefit payment card and then paying on top of that for the development of the post office benefit account and for the smart card. This led the Treasury to produce at lunchtime today a draft report by officials for ministers concluding that option B is too expensive and should be rejected by ministers, and that option A is undeliverable, not for technical reasons, but because of the dysfunctional relationship between the contracting parties, and should also therefore be rejected. This leaves only termination, which should be accepted by ministers as the least bad of 3 thoroughly unattractive options. You say at the bottom there on paragraph 4, I said immediately that DTI officials could not be a party to such a conclusion. Again, there seems to be quite a divide in government on the way forward.
Absolutely.
And the DTI's position is clearly set out there, that it certainly did not, wouldn't be a party to termination.
Yes.
And then if we go over the page, paragraph 5, you make a number of points. The first is the Prime Minister's remit was to explore an alternative way forward to option A, not to introduce the already discarded option of termination. And if we could look at the very final bullet point. Finally, the history of option A is indeed one of dysfunctional relationships, but tame acceptance that 2 public sector bodies would refuse to give effect to a clear collective decision by ministers is a sad basis for deciding on termination, with all the damage that would do. Again, strongly worded.
Yes, oh dear, I was upset. Yes.
I mean, have ministerial submissions become less strongly worded over the years, or was this a particularly strongly worded ministerial submission? Or maybe both?
Maybe a bit of both. Again, the frustration that we're just going round the same loop again and not finding a way through it. Nobody's disputing that some of these arguments that are put on the other side had validity, but at the end of the day, you were in a situation which had generated some political imperatives, and trying to pretend that they didn't exist or kicking against them, if you like, was just wasting everybody's time.
I'm going to move to May 1999. And can we look at Bayes 00000275, please? Now, this is a note or a document of the 11th of May 1999. It's from Catherine Hathaway. I believe she was a civil servant in your department. Is that right? Do you remember?
I don't remember, actually. I'm sorry. But I don't.
In the first paragraph, it mentions a meeting with George Hall.
Yes.
Do you recall George Hall? I believe he worked at ICL.
Yes.
This is a document that the inquiry's seen before. It was put to Keith Todd, and I'll just read to you the first paragraph under Horizon.
Yes.
It says, "We spent the first 30 minutes discussing Horizon, during which George confirmed that he knew that ministers were split between cancelling the project and option B1 version 2. He also knew exactly where the split lay, i.e. HMT, DSS versus the others. When asked how the deadline of the 23rd of April had been extended, he admitted it was only because ICL were fudging their financial reporting with potentially disastrous results as far as the directors were concerned. Can you offer us any insight into that at all?
Into what ICL were doing? No, I can't.
Do you remember this allegation being
Well,
made?
I know that what they were doing everything in their power to keep the project alive. I also know, I don't remember the details of it very well, that Fujitsu were looking to float Horizon, to float ICL, and obviously ICL were trying to make sure that nothing awful happened that would kill that.
The next paragraph, he confirmed that Keith Todd will lose his job should Horizon go down, and that Fujitsu will divest themselves of ICL, which will be broken up, and the services side will probably go to Siemens, along with some other Fujitsu interests on the hardware side. Siemens are known to be interested in acquiring a services business and are already in discussion with Fujitsu. Did you see that as a genuine concern or a negotiating tactic of some sort regarding the future of ICL?
Yeah. Ultimately, I think that is what could have happened. I'm not saying that I thought at the time that this is imminent. This is what is going to happen. But I certainly didn't discount it as if we carried on fudging this and making such a mess of it, that might well be where it all ended up, and particularly so if we cut loose ICL from going forward with the project.
The next paragraph, he also said that he was personally hawkish about the legal situation and regarded DSS as having been utterly duplicitous. He suggested that ICL might accuse DSS of fraud, which I somehow doubt actually. Indeed, he suggested that Horizon had been a great eye-opener for ICL as regards to how government did business, and that ICL would think very hard about ever undertaking this kind of project again. I assume that this will become common knowledge around the industry eventually, and that PFI and IT areas will become even more difficult than it already is. Why were DSS seen as duplicitous? Are you able to offer any insight into that? I appreciate they're not your words.
I don't know what he meant by that. I can only guess that he may have meant that a lot of DSS's claims were not well founded, and that DSS were attempting to achieve their objectives using information that wasn't really correct or wasn't proven or whatever. I don't know.
This is quite a frank conversation with somebody from ICL. Did ICL see the DTI as being very much on their side?
Yes. Yes, they did. And I had that from a number of sources on a number of occasions, that they were grateful that we were doing our best for them, and they knew that we were fighting hard against a very determined opposition. And I say it again, I have a great deal of sympathy with the benefits agencies' stance on this. It made perfect sense from their point of view.
This is the 11th of May. On the 24th of May, POCL and ICL reached an in-principle agreement. And I'm going to go to the 28th of May, and that's Bay 0000355. This is another submission from yourself, and this is a stage where a new working group was established. This is the 99 working group, I think, that you mentioned.
That's correct.
Earlier.
Yes.
Can you tell us briefly why the working group was set up?
Yes, I think it was to involve parties who hadn't been directly involved in other discussions, to bring them together, mainly the groups of people, the NFSP and CWU and so on, who were going to be using the equipment. We wanted to bring them in at that stage so that they had a sense of understanding where we were trying to get to and how we were trying to get there. But equally importantly, we saw that group as being a very useful source of feedback as to how the rollout was actually going and whether problems were being quickly identified, quickly reported back, quickly acted on, quickly resolved.
This submission sets out 4 issues. Can we look at paragraph 2? The first issue there are negotiations between POCL and ICL that need to take place over the next 2 to 3 months to put in place the detailed contractual arrangement that will give effect to the outline agreement reached last weekend. Then the next paragraph outlines a second issue. If we could scroll down slightly. The second issue is to ensure that the remaining development phases of Horizon, including large-scale live trials, are completed without further slippage, and most crucially, that the rollout of the system following acceptance to all offices within the network is accomplished in a smooth and timely fashion. The CWU and NFSP members will be in the front line of the action during these phases, and both organisations have much to contribute to the successful completion of these phases. It seems that the second issue is about prompt rollout of the system, no further slippage. Is that right? Is that a fair description of that second issue?
Yes, it is.
Over the page, please, to number 4. This is the third issue. The third issue is how to maximise the commercial potential of the Horizon platform. And then number 5 sets out the fourth issue. The fourth issue is how POCL is to be funded in the medium and longer term future once some £400 million of revenue from BA begin progressively to walk out through the door from 2003. And at the bottom of the page, it has the suggested terms of reference. And over the page, please. There are the 3 points there. Number 1, to oversee the negotiations between POCL and ICL, which will develop the letter of agreement signed between the parties on the 24th of May into a codified agreement governing the contractual relationship under which the project will be taken forward, and to facilitate solutions to any problems which may arise. Second, to oversee, to contribute actively to and to facilitate solutions where problems arise, the completion of the development phases of the Horizon project, and in particular the smooth and timely rollout of the system to all offices within the Post Office network. And 3, to contribute through ideas, contacts and other practical measures to maximising the commercial potential of the Horizon infrastructure, thereby to the future viability of the Post Office network as a whole. Is it right to say that this 1999 working group wasn't a technical group to analyse technical issues?
No, not at all. No, not at all. Except that if issues arose in sub-post offices when they were trying to work the system for the first time, those issues would be identified and reported back. Whether they were technical issues or not, I don't know, and probably the people who were reporting them back wouldn't necessarily know. They would just know that something wasn't working properly. Looking at these words again, I don't know. I think if I was drafting it today, which thank goodness I'm not, rather than oversee, which implies some kind of control over it, as it were, I think the concept was more to keep a very close eye on, and to see whether there are thoughts or whatever that you can contribute to the process as it goes on.
And who was expected to pass on through this group those kinds of issues? Who would you have expected to be contributing within the group
Yes.
To problems with the completion and development?
To be contributing within the group, I would have thought particularly the National Federation of Sub-Postmasters, because it was primarily their members up and down the country operating 40,000 or whatever it was of these terminals, who would be coming up with any problems that they were finding. I mean, they would know if something wasn't working properly, and if it wasn't working properly, it needed to be reported upwards, and it needed to be jumped on very, very quickly.
In terms of significant technical reports to government, am I right in saying that it's the 1998 working group that was the significant report as far as that is concerned, and that the 1998 working group report, and that the 1999 working group was not looking at things at a technical level, but was,
Yes.
as you say, receiving information from, amongst other people,
Yes.
the NFSP?
At this point in time, I'm not sure how much the original working group and its technical subgroup were still actively involved in all of this. My recollection, which may be quite wrong, is that they weren't to any very great extent. I don't recall them as being. What I would have expected is if some of these things that were being identified by sub-postmasters not working properly, they would have been, as I say, reported up to their bosses, to help desks or whatever, and if necessary, they would have been escalated upwards. Benefits agencies out of it at this point, of course, through POCL, through ICL, and escalated to whatever level was necessary to authorise whatever needed to be done to put it right.
We see on this page the suggested membership. So we have there the DTI,
Yes.
POCL, Communications Workers Union, National Federation of Sub-Postmasters, ICL wouldn't formally be a member, but would be invited to attend meetings as appropriate. Is this group the core group for feeding back those kinds of concerns about that are arising during that rollout period?
It was absolutely, it was intended to be absolutely a primary channel for that purpose. It doesn't mean that it would be the only one, but yes, it would be a primary one, and it would be perhaps I was going to say almost the only one that would be reporting, whose reports back would have gone to ministers.
Can we look at NFSP 00000471, please? This is a report of an NFSP meeting in June 1999. Would you have seen these reports at the time?
Not at all, no.
I've taken previous witnesses to these minutes, and I'm going to take you to the same couple of passages at page 23, please. About halfway down on that page. In fact, if we look at the page before, it'll make it clear at the bottom of that page, 9C, the discussion here is on counter-automation BA/POCL. And this is a meeting in June 1999. If we go over the page, please, about 3/4 of the way down, there's a paragraph, there was general discussion on the severe difficulties being experienced by sub-postmasters who are already running an automated system. 7 sheets of comments from the North East has been passed to Mr. David Miller. The difficulties and trauma being experienced by some sub-postmasters were giving rise to concerns for their health and emotional well-being. It was felt by some that a tragedy was not far away if something was not altered soon. The software was considered to be poor quality and not intended to run such a huge network. The system is based on Echo, which was originally written for a network of 700, not 15,500. Over the page, please. About halfway down, it says, the General Secretary assured the meeting that Mr. David Miller had been informed of the difficulties in no uncertain terms. Over the page again, we have the comments from Miss Linden. Miss Linden commented that this seemed to be a typical post office counter situation and felt that ICL could not be blamed for the problems. And it says there, pointing out that it is now 3 years since the project was first mooted, which is a very long time in the technological world. She suggested that a different system be tried, smaller and less complicated, which would be of greater benefit to the smaller post offices and probably be a good deal cheaper and easier to operate. POCL seemed to be attempting to build an audit system into the project, making the whole thing far too big, too cumbersome and too complicated. Were you aware of these kinds of concerns at the time being raised in an FSP meeting?
No, I read the pages that you've just referred to and several of the pages that follow it, and I was absolutely horrified. I thought it was unbelievable that with this level of concern at this stage in the rollout, this very early stage, the rollout of the project, that something was not done about it. Going on a few pages from here, there's the report of a meeting that I attended.
Perhaps we could go to, is it page 27 at the bottom? Sorry, do carry on. I may be pointing to the wrong part.
There was a bit where the minister was reported as saying, well, the implication is, I don't care what's the matter with it, this thing's got to go ahead and there should be no slippage. I don't recollect at all the minister saying that sort of thing in those terms. This is very, very stark, and absolutely not what we would have wanted to see. I know there was pressure to get the rollout going and even accelerating, but I find it difficult to believe that this is something that we would have, as a department, as a government, we would have countenanced, just turning a blind eye and saying, get on with it. It didn't come out, I think, in the meeting, anything like as starkly as it did in the paragraphs to which you referred just now, and some of the paragraphs around it, which make absolutely terrifying reading, really.
So the meeting that you attended, which I think is at the bottom of page 27,
Yes?
that was a meeting with Mr. Peabody and the General Secretary. You weren't present at the larger meeting, which is the subject of this report, is that right?
No. I was present at the meeting of the working group.
Yes.
Not anything else.
And the kinds of concerns that we have heard in this report, were those kinds of concerns in any way brought to your attention by Mr. Peabody at that meeting on the 22nd of June?
I don't think that I'm not saying he was trying to hide anything or not say that there weren't problems, but I don't ever remember getting from anyone anything with the flavour of those earlier paragraphs, which are really at the beginning of something that you're now going to multiply by 100 and 1,000 and 10,000 and so on, and just leave it.
And you've said that the Horizon Working Group 1999 was,
Yes.
was the forum to raise those kinds of issues.
It was a forum to raise these sort of things. Obviously not the only one. Obviously, if you've got a problem, you report it to your supervisor, or you report it to a help desk, or whatever. But this was certainly a channel for feeding back those kinds of discoveries, if you like, these reactions, and it was the one channel I would have said that has direct access to a minister.
We've seen who was at that NFSP meeting, and we've heard and read that comments were fed back to David Miller of Pockle. Who should have been passing on those messages to government or through the Horizon Working Group?
It should have come out, in my view, much more starkly at the meeting of that working group than it did. I don't recall, and I don't think the minutes really bring out that anything that was put to the group in quite those stark terms. I don't know. Maybe I'm misremembering, but I don't recall. I don't recall that. I know things were raised, and yes, we're going to talk to the post office about it, and so on. Nothing like this is awful. If this isn't resolved, this is an absolute showstopper. You know, we can't roll the thing out like this to all those poor sub-postmasters and sub-postmistresses around the country, and have them having nervous breakdowns and what have you, because they can't make the system work.
And who should have been shouting that message?
Well, the representatives in particular of the National Federation of Sub-Postmasters. I'm not saying they weren't doing their job. I think, I mean, they must answer for themselves. And I knew them very well, and they were good people. But they too needed to see the system rolled out and working. And I guess they thought, well, we don't necessarily want to start ringing alarm bells too loudly in case it generates pressure to stop the project or whatever it is. These are concerns. They must be raised with the post office. They must be sorted. But let's not overreact. Let's not frighten everybody. That's what I think. I mean, you have to ask them about it. But you've got the two documents there. You've got the one which records what's being said about the awful situation which some sub-postmasters were finding themselves in, and then you've got the minutes of the meeting, which I suggest don't quite reflect fully the flavour of that.
Moving to July of 1999, can we look at Bay 00000236, please? This is another ministerial submission from yourself. Can we scroll down, please? Thank you. The detailed agreement between Post Office Counters Limited and ICL for taking forward the restructured Horizon project was signed by the parties this morning. And over the page, please, to paragraph 5. After a slow and resentful start, POCL have, I think, surprised themselves at the progress that they've been able to make with ICL, both in contractual discussions and in resolving a large number of outstanding technical issues. It is very early days yet, and at risk of accusations of wishful thinking, I nevertheless detect in this early progress perhaps some vindication of Minister's decision to simplify the contractual relationship by taking the benefits agency out of the frame, and to simplify the technical content of the project by removing the benefit payments card. Were you feeling, would it be fair to say that you were cautiously optimistic at that stage?
Yes, I was. And I think what I was particularly optimistic about was that what caused the original Horizon project, if I can call it that, to fail, more than anything, I think, was that the benefits agency and POCL, not attaching blame to either side, just couldn't get on. And ICL, who probably had their faults as well, were stuck in the middle of this. And I think it was probably more than anything that caused the delays and eventually the sort of collapse of Horizon Mark 1, if I can call it that.
Paragraph 6, it says, by the same token, however, if POCL are at least beginning to lift themselves out of the depression into which they sank as a result of the decision to allow BA to move to ACT from 2003, it will now be very important to them for ministers to reach a compromise that at least gives them some modest gains over what is currently on offer in their negotiations with BA. And a bit further down, they have a mountain to climb if the hugely ambitious programme for rollout of the system to 40,000 counter positions and nearly 19,000 offices is to be completed on schedule, and if they are to drive forward in a positive and optimistic spirit the search for new business to help plug the £400 million a year hole in their finances that the loss of BA revenue will create. A positive sign for ministers now stands to produce benefits well beyond its modest cost. A negative sign could not fail to damage the healing process. I think the state of depression is something that you mentioned earlier. Can you give us a flavour of that, please?
I just think that at the end of all these negotiations, and before they'd actually got anything on the ground to show for it, POCL felt that they'd been shafted. They felt that they'd been kind of cut adrift with no benefit payment card, and a system that they didn't know what they could do with. The negotiations with ICL for Horizon Mark 1 had been so fractious and unproductive that they probably feared that the same thing might happen with Horizon Mark 2. But I think they found, or at least the people who were dealing with ICL found, that when it was just a one-on-one and there wasn't this ridiculous sort of triangular relationship, that they could actually make progress and get things done. And I think they started to feel an awful lot more cheerful. That was the sense that I got from the people that I spoke to, but perhaps I was speaking to the wrong people.
Well, we've seen an ICL monthly report. I'm not going to take you to it. I think you've been provided with it recently. Its reference for the purpose of the transcript is FUJ 000588183. That's a report of June of 1999, and it says that POCL continued to remain negative and critical towards the programme and hadn't got over their bitterness in the way in which they'd been treated by the public sector, and that they held ICL partly responsible. Is that something you would agree with?
Well, it's obviously somebody's interpretation of what they feel the mood in POCL to be. I've said that there was a great deal of bitterness around the start of the rollout program. I was certainly aware of that, but the cloud seemed to be lifting. It seemed to be looking an awful lot more positive. But
did you sense any mistrust between the post office and ICL at that stage?
No, I don't think I did. I think probably POCL, as the thing went along, were kind of half expecting nasty surprises because of the bad experience that they had before. But I thought, after the end of, or towards the end of 2000, I wasn't there anymore. I'd retired, so I don't know how it progressed after that point. But when I left it, I thought there was a greater sense of optimism than there had been up until that point.
The second half of this paragraph describes the rollout as hugely ambitious. Do you think it was too ambitious in respect of its time frame, for example?
I'm sorry, what are we looking at?
So they have a mountain to climb if the hugely ambitious programme for rollout of the system to 40,000 counter positions and nearly 19,000 offices is to be completed on schedule.
Yeah.
Looking back at it, or perhaps even your view at the time, do you or did you consider that it was too optimistic and perhaps rushed?
I remember thinking that this was a huge program to try to manage, to get 40,000 terminals in and working, and the people trained to use it properly, and the help desk set up and in place, and all that. Yes, enormously ambitious. I don't think I had a sense that, oh, this can't possibly work, can it? But just sort of looking with some awe at what they were planning to achieve.
The Benefits Agency had pulled out in May of 1999. The plan was to roll out pretty soon. Do you think the time period that was left for example, all of that testing that you talked about at the very beginning of today, do you think there was sufficient time for all of that?
I suppose, do I or did I? I don't know. I don't know at the time how conscious I was of all of that. looking at it now, my understanding is that once they had ripped the guts out of Horizon, that is the removal of the benefit payment card part of the technology, the amount of testing that was done thereafter to see whether the residual bits were working properly, there was very little time. I'm not saying that the testing wasn't adequate. There was very little time, and I wonder whether there was enough time for all of the testing that should have been done, could have been done, would have been desirable to do, was actually done. But it's very easy, always in these circumstances, to say, well, in an ideal world, we would have spent another 6 months testing this. But it wasn't. It was a somewhat less than optimum world, if you like, that they were trying to do all of this in.
We know from this morning that in 1998 there was this thorough look into the viability of the Horizon system. Do you think that summer of 1999 would have been an appropriate time to have carried out another government look at the reliability this time of the Horizon system?
Yeah, in retrospect, perhaps it would. I don't know what the technical experts would have felt at the time, whether it was worth going back and having another sort of look at the roots, as it were, to see how they were growing. Clearly, by the time it was rolled out, quite a lot of time had elapsed. And we know that in that time, it wasn't visible to us, but we knew that work was continuing, even though ICL had been put in breach back in the November or whatever it was, and they must have known that was coming down the road at them anyway. My understanding is that they carried on working. And carried on with developments, in the hope, certainly, that when ministers finally, I was going to say, got their act together. That sounds terribly patronising. I don't mean that. That once decisions had been reached, they would be that much further forward and be able to move the thing on. Everyone, I think, was conscious of time in all of this. The Benefits Agency, very conscious that until something was sorted, the losses from fraud from the paper-based system would continue unabated. So, they too needed this thing to be settled.
Can we look at a document from August 1999? That's Bay 0000119, please. This is lines to take that have been prepared for a meeting with Derek Hodgson. Do you recall this document or the background to this at all?
I think I probably do, yes.
It doesn't matter so much because I'm only really going to take you to the background section.
Yeah.
But
So
if there's anything that you recall from
what I was just going to say about what's on the screen at the moment, in two respects, the system was not yet suitable for acceptance and declined to do so. What we understood that there were two screen freezes and something at the...
Perhaps we could scroll down, actually.
Okay.
Because that's
Right.
where the two problem areas are highlighted. It says the two problem areas which led Pockle to refuse acceptance on the 18th of August are some connection difficulties resulting in a small number of counter transactions not being properly recorded in the back-end systems, and B, higher than expected incidents of screen freeze. ICL confident that these are just glitches for which they have an effective fix. POCL wants a demonstration of this by 2 to 3 weeks clear running before accepting the system, because acceptance triggers a significant payout to ICL, £68 million. Where would that information have come from, do you know?
I think we would have been told of that by the post office, I assume. I don't know.
And is that the kind of technical detail that you would be provided with at that stage, that limited detail, or do you think...
I don't think we would have been provided with that sort of level of detail at all if it hadn't suddenly cropped up as a potentially serious means of delay to the program. In the event it wasn't, and POCL apparently had satisfied themselves that the patches that had been put in place were good and were holding, and so they went ahead with it. But no, we wouldn't normally have had sight of that level of detail if it hadn't been for the context of it. I believe there was something else around at the time concerning help desks that had to be resolved as well, that POCL were unhappy about. But other than that, at that point in time, we had no reason to believe that POCL were anything, and ICL were anything other than satisfied that the system was in a sufficiently good shape for it to be rolled out.
You've mentioned the help desk. Perhaps I can take you to another document that shows that. That's Bayes 000011. Oh, sorry. Bayes 0000264. This is just a front sheet. In fact, it's the annex to that I'd like to take you to, but that has a separate document reference number. That is Bayes 00000265. And these are points to make. It's for a meeting between Patricia Hewitt and ICL on the 2nd of November 1999. And it says that I was pleased to hear that the Post Office formally accepted the Horizon automation system on the 24th of September, although I understand this was delayed by 1 month. And if we look over the page, it has some background there. Formal acceptance of the reconfigured Horizon system planned for the 18th of August was postponed because the Post Office counters concerns about training, system stability, data integrity. There had been an unacceptably high level of screen freezes and the effective operation of the help desk. The Post Office accepted the system on the 24th of September on the basis that effective remedial action had either been completed or was in hand. Currently, 950 post offices are automated, and the Post Office expects that this will rise to 1,800 before Christmas. The Post Office is committed to achieving rollout of the system by March 2001 at the rate of 300 offices per week. So again, there's mention in very summary form of the kinds of issues that are being experienced on the Horizon system. Having seen those NFSP meeting minutes, for example, do you feel that at that time, so August, September, October of 1999, you were being provided with a frank assessment of the rollout success or otherwise?
I have no reason to believe that the Post Office, that POCL, would have wanted to cover up any problems that there were. I can't believe that they would have wanted to sign a cheque for £68 million or whatever it was for the system. If they weren't satisfied, in the words here, that effective remedial action had either been completed or was in hand. I think, again, I've said before, a system of this size and this complexity was bound to have teething problems showing up. And the issue was, how quickly can you jump on these? How quickly can you resolve them and put corrections in place? I don't know what the answer to that was, because, as I say, I wasn't there for very long after that.
But do you think at that time you were being provided with sufficient information about how it was going?
I don't think we would have been provided with a lot of detailed information at all. We would have been provided with information about the bigger issues, and told when they were, and told when they had been resolved. I'm not sure how much of this also came up through the Horizon Group 99.
I'm going to take you to one more document before we have a short break, and then I've just got some individual issues to take you to that shouldn't last too long. But let's look at this further document. It's Bay 0000478. You produced some briefings and lines to take in autumn of 1999. I think a few different ones have been provided to you in advance of today, but it's this one that I will take you to. These are lines to take in respect to the Trade and Industry Select Committee report. Do you remember, in summary, what that report said, or what that report was about?
I don't remember that particular document.
Perhaps we could scroll down slightly.
Yeah, I think this was, this was just lines to take on what the Select Committee had reported.
Yes.
On.
Perhaps if we keep on scrolling, we can
Yes.
see where it goes to the Q&A
Yes.
brief.
Yeah.
And over the page, please.
Yeah.
It addresses on page 5,
Right.
about halfway down. These are simply, I think, press lines or lines to take. I think in fact, the covering document said to Ms. Madsen News, so presumably that's the news desk of the DTI, is
Yes.
it? Yes. And it says there, given the failures of this project, why didn't the government just terminate and find another supplier? And the line to take there is, the government is satisfied that the agreement has put the project back on track. This will deliver a modern online IT platform to some 40,000 counter positions in more than 18,000 post offices and represents the best value for money for the taxpayer. There are lots, if we keep on scrolling, there are lots of subjects, but technical robustness is only addressed at page 13. And over to page 13, please. Thank you. And it's the second point there. It says, IT consultants appointed by the government's review found the system to be technically robust and deliverable, ? So this is a point that, an anticipated point that somebody may
Yes.
put to the DTI.
Yes.
And the response is, they also found that its deliverability was dependent on a number of other factors. Given the possibility of further delays with the project and the lack of assurances on cost and timetable, the government decided that a restructuring of the project had become essential. That reference there to IT consultants having found the system to be technically robust and deliverable, that seems again to be a reference back to the 1998 report and the DTI's interpretation of that report.
I think it must have been earlier than that. I think my recollection is that the original Horizon Mark 1, if you like, which was close to completion, although it wasn't allowed to go ahead and get properly completed. The technical experts looked at that and said, in effect, if this had been allowed to go ahead, we think it would have worked and worked well, is my
So
recollection.
you don't think that that is a reference to, for example, the PA consulting report back in 1998 that fed into the Horizon Working Group report?
I don't think specifically it was a PA report, no. I mean, at that stage, various people were looking at various things.
What there hadn't been by this stage, though, so 1999,
Yep.
was an up-to-date consultant report that found the system as then being rolled out to be technically robust and deliverable.
I agree with that. Yes, that's true.
Do you think that that was perhaps a missed opportunity?
It might have been. I'm sure that the reason for it was the pressure now to simply get this thing on the road and going. In retrospect, it's possible to say that if there had been more time, things could have been done differently and perhaps better. But at the time and in the circumstances, that was the way that it was handled. As I say, possibly less than optimum, but it was always the time pressure. And this is not just the time pressure from the post office or the DTI. It was a time pressure from everybody. You know, the benefits agency wanted the thing moved forward so that they could get closer to the point when they could plug the leak of fraudulent money disappearing from the system that they had to account for. So everybody wanted a solution.
Thank you very much. Sir, I think that's a convenient moment to take perhaps a 10-minute break.
Yeah, by all means.
Thank you very much.
So what's that? What time will that be? 3:25?
Yes, thank you very much.
Fine, thank you.
Hello, sir.
Hi there.
Mr. Sibbick, I'm going to ask you about a few discrete issues. I shouldn't be very long. I can't imagine I'll be longer than half an hour.
As far as I'm concerned, as long as you need.
Thank you. The first one is Japan. There are many documents that you've been provided that address the relations with Fujitsu and wider relations, commercial relations. For the record, for example, they include Bays 0000127, Bays 0000281, Bays 0000127, Bays 0000421. Those are all from September and October 1998. I'm going to start with December of 1998. And can we look at Bays 0000336, please? There is Bays 0000334, which is just a covering telegram, and I won't look. I'll skip over that. Do you remember seeing this, at least in preparation? If not, we can take a bit more time over it. It's a telegram from Tokyo, from the British Embassy. It may assist. Sorry, could we go to Bays 0000334, please? So this is from Isabel Anderson, who I believe worked for you or with you.
With me, yes.
And I think you are, yes, you're copied in there. And this is attaching certain documents, including a note of a meeting between Sir David Wright, ambassador in Japan, and Mr. Naruto, vice chairman of Fujitsu and chairman of ICL UK. And Mr. Sakai, Senior Vice President of Fujitsu, and Mr. Urini, Director of ICL UK. And then perhaps if we could go to 336. This is the note. This is the telegram itself. I don't need to go into great detail of this particular document. Perhaps we can just look at paragraph 3. You have there Mr. Naruto stressing the difficult and serious crisis that Horizon faced at that time. So that's December 1998. They were worried that HMG didn't fully understand the seriousness of the situation. And perhaps at the bottom of the page, we have Mr. Naruto fearing for Fujitsu's domestic reputation if the project failed. And he repeatedly stressed that the failure of the project will have serious repercussions for Fujitsu's international standing. And perhaps we can go down to the conclusion. The contents of the letter and the tone of Naruto's approach make it quite clear that we have a major and potentially damaging problem on our hands. And next paragraph 8, failure of Project Horizon and of ICL's role in it would also have knock a hole in the credit we get here for PFI/PPP initiatives. The Fujitsu/ICL role in Project Horizon has been seen as a template for high-level political study here of this approach to large-scale public projects. Paragraph 9, it continues, any threats to ICL's continued viability would have profound implications for jobs in the UK and bilateral ties. Could we go to Bay 0000278? This is another telegram from the British Embassy, the 25th of January 1999, so moving on slightly. And this is, if we look at paragraph 1, at his request, Keith Todd, Chief Executive of ICL, called me, that's the ambassador, on 23rd of May, After talks with the Fujitsu president, he expressed Fujitsu's, quote, complete disbelief and lack of understanding at HMG's decision-making process, unquote. That telegram continues in a similar theme. Can we look at Bay 00000315, please? This is a briefing for the Secretary of State on the 4th of June 1999, so quite a bit on. And if we go over the page, and over the page again to the background, it sets out that there was a meeting on the 14th of May against the background of negotiations which have been taking place between HMG and ICL, led by HM Treasury on a compromise solution. And it sets out there that in paragraph 2 that Mr. Sekizawa stressed that unless an unconditional agreement could be signed by the 17th of May, Fujitsu would have to accept a 306 million provision in their consolidated group accounts. If that happened, he would find it very difficult to justify to shareholders and analysts any course of action other than to walk away from the project and seek to recover the £300 million development costs already incurred. Paragraph 3, later that evening, Steve Robson wrote to ICL with a counter-proposal requiring ICL to accept a loss estimated by ICL to be £250 million. There's no doubt that when news of this offer reached Mr. Sekizawa and Mr. Naruto on their arrival in Japan, there were strong feelings that the company had been betrayed by the British government. In these tense negotiations over the coming days, we know that it was your letter to Keith Todd of the 21st of May confirming the government's wish to proceed with the project, and later the personal appeal to Mr. Naruto by the Deputy Ambassador on your behalf that persuaded Fujitsu not to abandon negotiations. Can you tell us, over this period, how significant it was and how much pressure there was to maintain this relationship with ICL and not to damage ties with Fujitsu?
I think it was, from the very beginning, seen within the DTI as very important indeed that it would have been a major blow, as I think I've already described, to the whole PFI concept. If a project of this importance and this stature, if you like, failed, but it was, however important that was only one element in our consideration. The other was the damage to the network of post offices up and down the country if the thing failed. So we had these twin objectives, as it were, to keep on trying to press ministers into a solution that dealt with these two issues. And I think it was the combination of them, the industrial one and the purely political one, the sub-postmasters and the network and so on, that in the end, the force of those arguments, I would say that, wouldn't I? But the force of those arguments were what prevailed.
We see at paragraph 2, the chairman of Fujitsu stressing that an unconditional agreement needed to be signed by the 17th of May, and negotiations thereafter concerning the date, and May was seen as particularly important, May of 2000. May of 1999. Can you tell us how much time pressure there was coming from the Fujitsu end?
Quite a lot. As we understood it, there was a lot of pressure on them to get this sorted out, so that they could sign off their accounts, as I understand it, for that year, and a lot hinged on this as to whether Fujitsu would have no alternative but to kind of just cut ICL loose, disband it, whatever they were going to do with it. And we understood that there were genuine, absolutely genuine time pressures there. And this wasn't just Fujitsu trying to scare us or whatever. We believed that it was real, rightly or wrongly. I think it was real.
A second topic I'd like to ask you about it is simply the financial success or otherwise of ICL. And can we look at Bayes 00000255, please? This is a submission to Sir Michael Scholar on the 14th of July 2000, and it relates to a draft NAO National Audit Office report on the cancellation of the benefits card project. So it's a draft of that report that had been received by that date. Can we look at page 4 of that submission, please? And it's paragraph 8 that I'd like to ask you about.
Right.
It says, given how badly wrong the project went from almost day one, the National Audit Office report could hardly fail to make uncomfortable reading to a greater or lesser extent for each of the key players. Within this, however, our objective has been to secure a report which focuses in a positive way on the lessons to be learnt from the project and which, without pulling punches, at least avoids unnecessary criticism that could gratuitously damage the commercial prospects of either ICL and through them our relations with their parent Fujitsu or of POCL. How important was avoiding damage to the commercial prospects of ICL and Fujitsu, even at this stage after the rollout had taken place and the contracts had all been signed?
I think it was important in the sense that ICL needed to be a healthy partner going forward on all this. We weren't there to make ICL rich or anything like that, but we did need them to be financially viable so that they could take this project forward. They would have money to spend on further development of the project that was going to be essential if it was to survive more than a few years without completely running into the sand. So yes, we did want to see ICL financially healthy.
Can we look at Bayes 00000253, please? This is 31st of July 2000, so again, long after the contracts had been signed and rollout had commenced. This is a submission from yourself to the Secretary of State.
Yep.
And it's about the timing of the publication of the NAO report. And I just want to look at the second half of paragraph 1, please. It says, ICL wanted early publication to minimise the adverse effect on their planned flotation in the autumn of a report which shows the company's performance on the Horizon project is in less than a flattering light. Do you think that by that stage the DTI had become too close to ICL?
No, I don't think so. There are two. There was a part of the DTI, not the part that I was in, that was responsible for sponsoring the electronic sector, or whatever it was called. I didn't have the sense that they were necessarily too close to ICL. I certainly wasn't. I spoke to them periodically. I knew some of the senior people there, but no, I don't think we were I don't think that we were too close to them at all. I think we had a genuine interest in seeing ICL as a healthy company in a very important sector of our economy.
Do you think that it would be right for the DTI to be concerned about the timing of a publication to minimise the effect on ICL's planned flotation, for example?
If it was something that was going to happen anyway, and you could do it at a certain time rather than another time, and that would be helpful to one of the partners of a huge project, why wouldn't you do that? You know, why would you go out of your way to be unhelpful if you could do the reverse?
Thank you very much. The next subject I'd like to ask you about is PFI. So paragraph 33 of your statement, and I think you've also mentioned it already today, you said that the DTI avoided the loss of a major player in the electronics sector, the risk of future investment prospects, and the damage to the PFI brand. And then at paragraph 34 of your statement, you refer again to damage to the image of the UK's PFI initiative. How important was the PFI brand?
It was something to which the government attached quite a lot of importance. It was Adrian Montague's, I can say baby. He was sort of in charge of promoting that. I think it was just something that the UK had kind of come up with, and a lot of other administrations were interested in that as a way of helping to finance public sector projects, and people who were looking to us and saying, wow, aren't you clever, this is a wonderful way of doing things, would have, well, we wouldn't have wanted then to see the thing suddenly collapse and say, not such a good way after all, perhaps.
Are you aware of any complications that PFI may have imposed in the project itself, such as problems with the sharing of information between Fujitsu and the post office?
I'm personally not aware of that, no.
I'm going to move on to prosecutions. To what extent were you aware of any consideration being given to the use of Horizon for prosecutions, or Horizon data for prosecutions?
I was not aware of that at all.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sibbick, is there anything else that you'd like to add that may assist the chair, or that you would like to say?
A number of things, I suppose, if I can kind of order them a bit. The first is, with the benefit of hindsight, we can all be geniuses, and we wouldn't have necessarily done things in the way that we did had we had wider sight or wider knowledge, as it were. Perhaps the second thing that I would say is that you will see that I've put a lot of submissions, a lot of advice to ministers over this period. Ministers I've been fortunate enough to work for have been pretty bright people, more than capable of making up their own minds on things. Try to give them the facts. They could accept what I was suggesting that they should do, what the actions should be, but they were clearly under no obligation whatsoever to accept that. If they thought I was wrong, they would have said so. They'd have had no hesitation in saying so. the third thing, perhaps, if I may, is that I don't think any of the parties to this were acting in bad faith. I think they were promoting vigorously their own vested, I'm sure, their own interests, which was what they were there to do. And I think all of them genuinely believed what they were saying. I've said several times that what the Benefits Agency wanted, what DSS wanted, on their terms, made absolute sense. It was the right thing to do. And in a wider sense, it was also the right thing to do. It just so happened that there were some arguments on the other side that were also very persuasive and which in the end more or less prevailed. Perhaps a final thought, well, I don't know if it's a final one, but another thought is that everybody acted. This was a huge, complicated project. It was, to a large extent, treading ground that hadn't been trodden before. It would have been wrong to expect perfection first time round. No, it was never going to be like that. And then, when it went wrong initially, various stakes had already been put in the ground. We had a contract with ICL. It was a highly publicised contract, the Horizon project, and you couldn't undo that. You couldn't sort of unsee that. So there was a compulsion to say, okay, that's there. It would be pretty awful just to sort of abandon it. We perhaps don't have that luxury. We need to take it forward. We need to find some way of taking it forward. I don't think at the end of this anybody got exactly what they wanted. It was a compromise, and a very difficult compromise to reach. I was very pleased to play some small part in all of that. I'm so sorry that it turned out badly in the end for so many people, and I just wish your inquiry every success in getting to the bottom of this, and above all, in making sure that nothing like this could ever happen again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sibbick. Sir, do you have any questions at all?
No, I don't, thank you. And do I take it, Mr. Blake, that you've asked all the questions in this instance that this witness is to be asked?
Yes, I have.
Thank you. Well, I'm very grateful to you, Mr. Sibbick, for coming to give evidence before the inquiry. I'm sorry that I caused a slight delay this morning, which I hope didn't inconvenience you too much. And thanks again for attending.
Thank you very much, sir.
So 10 o'clock tomorrow, Mr. Blake?
Yes, thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much.